Let's finish with Walid Sadek. So we'll continue and we'll finish. And the last part that we'll have to cover is the labor of ruin proper. We've seen last time the labor of witnessing. I think you can consider the labor of witnessing, at least this is how I see it, as a kind of typology of the Lebanese population. You can sort out the Lebanese population, or those who lived here, and not only here, those who are related to the Lebanese problem, as a series of witnesses. And you have seen that you have all kinds of witnesses. You have, for example, the impregnated witness, as you have seen last time. The impregnated witness is someone who witnesses from a close distance. He's not directly, he's affected, of course, but he's here like witnessing, and he keeps a kind of distance in relation to what he's witnessing, and he becomes impregnated by that. So we said last time that if you take Jean Genet or the Palestinian guy that was speaking, you see their speech is very rich in images and movements and colors and details. And all of these things really invade the speech in their vivacity, because the one who witnesses such scenes is really, it's very striking as what you are seeing is just incredible. And this inhabits you, and you become impregnated by such images. And this is why Walid says your tongue becomes forked. You start talking quickly or with two tongues. You start talking as if the images themselves are finding a way inside your speech as they are, as if you lose your agency. It's not that you would like to say this or that. It's simply that it starts to speak through you. These images start to speak through you, and this kind of very, very image language that characterizes the impregnated witness. We have seen other witnesses, such as the witness who knows too much. It's a bit different. It's like the case of the woman that you have seen, the Palestinian woman that was raped. And you see here it's a different form of absorption. His absorption is such that you cannot really anymore speak the events that happen to you, because they are very, very painful. And hence you have this kind of heavy speech with big silences, interruptions, and the like. Now, this is an impregnated witness. So, of course, you have other witnesses. You have, for example, the indifferent witness. This is actually very important and very, very present in Lebanon, where when you witness or you go through episodes of war or violence, you have to keep on going. So one of the survival strategies, even if it's not always very conscious or decided to be such, one of the survival strategies is simply to be very light and very, very volatile, and not to care too much about what is happening, because if you care too much about what is happening, this could crush you or burden you. So one of these strategies is this kind of indifferent, insipid witness that just keeps on resuming his life as if nothing happened. Other forms that you have seen, you have the historical witness, the one who still considers that he's part of a struggle that is going on for 30 years and he will win one day, like Jarjoura's Terminator that I talked about. You really think that you are still one of these Aouni soldier, and you are still carrying the struggle, and your fight wasn't over yet, etc. And we've said you have other types like the heroic witness, the Christic witness, all kinds of types. We've seen a little bit the Christological witness. Walid talks about them. These are witnesses that, or if you want, the kind of religious witness that only witnesses in the name of God or in the face of God. and whatever they did is absorbed by this kind of relation to God. Now, one witness which is quite interesting, just to reconstruct this this kind of binarity with which we are working with Walid, is the impossible witness. Now, the impossible witness is which one? It's the one who goes to disclose a truth. I'm going to tell you what happened in Ashrafi or in the camps or in when Amal or Hezbollah or whatever militia kidnap someone. I'm going to reveal the truth. And you go there to reveal the truth, and you see them almost like they tell you, okay, but we already knew that. Now, this is what Walid calls a public secret. A public secret, meaning we all know what happened in these camps, prisons, houses made prisons, and all of these places in which Beirut used to be populated by little places for torture. We all know that. It's not a secret. Actually, it's a public secret because everyone knows it, but what can you do? The militias govern until today, and there was an amnesty law, so you can't do anything about it. So when you go there and you disclose these truths, you become an impossible witness. An impossible witness meaning, okay, your witnessing is not really witnessing, it's a testimony, and it falls short. One of these, in such situation, you can become a witness in retreat, meaning you're sick of trying to bring the truth to these people, to the militias, and to the population, because you see that they really don't care. And in this kind of tragic gesture, you isolate yourself, or you go into exile, or you become a priest, or a sheikh, or whatever, meaning you have this kind of sudden conversion and retreat. Now, I'm telling you this because what's interesting in Walid is saying is that if you as a witness still considers that you can bring about the truth, really like, I'm going to tell you what happened, you will see that you're going to face a wall which is the wall of the public secret. So it's not a practicable path. On the other hand, if you are someone who simply wants to instrumentalize and forget and move on, also it doesn't work. It will haunt you and stay with you. So the only path that I think Walid is advocating for, again, as usual, is to really assume what you have witnessed without the need or the project of forgetting it, nor of turning it into a project for truth and for justice and the like. I hope now you're getting these alternatives. So when you are an impregnated witness or a witness who knows too much, you are really burdened and shaped by what you have witnessed. It's not something that is like a truth that you are going to divulgate or something that you would like to forget and to get healed from, which are, if you want, the two polarities. And here, as Walid says, and he insists on that, and he wrote it many times, that you have to acknowledge that we have lost. And when you have lost and you acknowledge that you have lost, you become one of these witnesses who carry their witnessing, and their witnessing shapes the way they speak, the way they see, and the way they live. Like Simon in the village, that is always there, present in the village, even though he's not speaking the history of the war. He's just there. And when you ask him about the violent episode of the wars, he avoids it, or you feel that he's burdened by it. This is, if you want, the way you get really in contact with these situations. You really carry them in your stomach, in your life, etc. So I hope this is clear. And one of these witnesses,
The difference, the indifferent witness and the ahistorical, is the same?
Yes, they are. The indifferent is the ahistorical, yes. The ahistorical witness is the one who just doesn't want to hear about it. So I'll show you the table soon. So this way you will not get lost in it, because there are many characters and things like that. You have the ahistorical witness is the neutral one. Yeah, it's the one who just resumes his life after bombardments and the like. Right? So Now, a last witness that you have seen, or one of the first, is what you have called the excessive witness. The excessive witness is when you are in a place of safety and you are a kind of unwelcomed witness or an uninvited witness to extreme violence nearby. That's what you are called the excessive witness. You have you're there, you're watching the neighbors being bombarded, and you can't do anything about it, and yet you know that you are safe. And even your safety, you can't do anything about it. It's not that you were collaborating with the enemy or stuff like that. You're just in a safe place because of the politics of Lebanon. This is what you call the excessive witness. Now, if you remember, the excessive witness was the consequence of a geopolitical situation where the sectarian lines of divide are such that you could be in Dahi and you are bombarded, while if you are, let's say, in Hazmiye, you're not bombarded. It's as simple as that. This creates this kind of excess. And you have seen the short clip by Rania Stefan, where you see how, even though you are in a kind of situation of excessive witnessing, you can, after the war or after the bombardments, try to connect to those who were directly witnessing the war, who might become impregnated witnesses or witnesses who know too much, as the man that you have seen who's unable to speak anymore. You can reconnect to these people across this kind of line of divide. And there's a possible dialogue to be made here between these different groups witnessing differently the violences. Now, in the same text, peddling time while standing still, in the same text, Walid at one point says that, okay, so what do you do in this situation that is hijacked by, at least at that time it was still very strong, today it's a bit less, hijacked by the 14 and 8 divide. Today, as you know, they're more or less in good terms, more or less, at least they are helping each other. Okay, so, but at that time, meaning after 2007-8, the tension was quite high. And really, what can you do in this situation? Well, what can you do if whatever you do, you are hijacked by these two projects, either destroy Israel or bring justice and destroy Syria, practically. And you can't do anything until then. You can't do anything until then, meaning forget about your life for the time being. Before we solve these big issues, everything is useless. Now, when you are in such a situation, the city becomes it becomes impermeable. It becomes something that you cannot really, or in which you cannot really project your actions. You can't open a shop, you can't bring electricity, you can't do this, you can't do that. You can't just have a normal life or scholarity or whatever, because all your projects are hijacked by these two kind of discourses or mega projects. So this kind of view of time, where time is always something in the future, deferred, where the solution will come one day, makes the present an absent or an inexisting present. And what your relation to space becomes a relation where you can't really do anything in space. Things which are very simple. If you want just to fix the road or open a shop or do very basic things like have electricity or make a recycling project or whatever, you are always taken into these dynamics where you can't do it because it's on the side of this militia or that militia, and here you can do that because it's a security zone, and there you can do it because it's part of that other zone. And really, the space is like it's like a grid where you can't intervene anymore. You as a free person who would like just to do things, and in that situation, you are really like detached from space. You think about things, and you can't do them. You have this kind of clash between your dreams and projects, and doing them in space. And this is the detachment of space and time. So Walid says, how can you bring back space and time together, knowing that the situation is really a situation which is saturated by the powers which are in place? How can you bring them together? You can't say heroically, I'm going to bring water to Beirut or do a recycling company just like that. You will get immediately in friction with those who are doing the garbage business, or those who are doing the electricity business, or those who are doing the food business. So you have, it's saturated. So what do you do in this situation? What you do is you create a collision, and this is what Walid calls a chronotope. Now, what is a chronotope? A chronotope is when you and your activity, with the background of the city, you form a unity which is a kind of affective unity. So I explain. Walid gives the example of Mroué. Mroué made a play where it's called Please Help Me Stop Smoking. So it's kind of addiction. And in this play, you see Mroué sitting on stage, and he has his laptop. And he says, you see, I have here the folder of my projects, and I have here the folder of my realized projects. And in the folder of my projects, there are all kinds of things that I would like to do. Like I would like to make an archive about the highways in Lebanon. I would like to take pictures. And I had another project on the killed cats on the highway. So each time he sees a killed cat, he takes a picture of it. And he has all kinds of project on the electricity things hanging in the streets, all kinds of archival projects in Lebanon. And you see that it's an infinite thing. He spends his time taking pictures of all kinds of things which are more or less not working well in Lebanon. And you feel that it's like a never-ending archival process. So the holes in the streets, he takes all the different shapes of holes in the street, etc. You're getting the idea. It's quite funny, actually, when he shows you all the stuff that he's archiving. And then he says that actually, for him, a project is realized when in a talk like this one, he shows us the picture, and hence he puts the picture from this folder in that folder. I hope you get it. So let's take the holes, which is easy. Okay, I showed you 4 holes from my archival of the holes in the city, so I move them now to the realized project. You see how it's a bit funny, ridiculous. For him now it's over, I was able to deal with the holes because I showed you the picture and I put them in the other folder. Now, while Walid saw that, and Walid had the impression that while Mroué is talking, I don't know if you know Rabia Mroué is the way he is, he's very lively with big hands and stuff like that, and he's really like gesticulating. And Walid says, you really feel someone which is like drowning in this scraps of things which are useless and moving them here and there and here. And you feel that it's a never-ending gesticulation. And this is where you feel that this guy is really now in Lebanon. He's really now in Lebanon because you feel that he's falling. It's like someone falling from a building and gesticulating, and all what he can do is gesticulate while he's falling and falling and falling, and you never stop falling. This is, if you want, the archive in which you swim and where you don't stop falling into these never-ending issues. Walid gives another example, which is from the movie The Last Man, also an image of a man falling. He calls them descendants. I don't know if you have seen The Last Man. It's a movie by Ghassan Salhab. It's about a vampire, doctor vampire, etc. But whatever the story is, at one point, this doctor vampire scuba diver, these are his characteristics, so he does that. So he's scuba diving, and then at one point you see that he's going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and you see bubbles of water, and it never ends. It never ends. At least Walid focuses on that image. He takes that image, and he says this is a kind of chronotope. What does it mean? It means that only by acknowledging the uselessness of our actions, Again, it has the same form of acknowledging the loss and acknowledging that you don't have a future and stuff like that. Only by acknowledging that whatever you do is useless, this is when you can compose with the city a chronotype. Why? Because the city is absolutely impassible. It doesn't care. Beirut is like a surface that doesn't care. Doesn't care because of the grid established by the militias and corruption and the like. And on that grid, all what you can do is simply gesticulate and gesticulate and gesticulate. And this is when you and this kind of impassible background, you form a figure. You form, I would call it a face. You form a face because if you take what is a face? A face is simply when you have an intensive line on a reflective, impassible surface. So Beirut, with its impassibility, is the reflective surface, and the lines that usually make the face, which are the lines of expression, like when you smile or groan, etc., these are the intensive lines. This is taken from Deleuze, but it doesn't matter. This is, if you want, the constructive formula of a face. So when you have a reflexive, impassible surface and intensive lines on it, this is when you have a kind of relation between the two elements, which is not a relation of changing the world, doing actions, projecting yourself in the future and the like. It's simply an affective composition where the actions themselves become the intensive line of this background. Now, technically speaking, meaning aesthetically speaking, something in which you cannot intervene is a ruin. What is a ruin? Of course, there's a ruin, which is, they bomb your house, you go out, and this is a real ruin. Why it's a ruin? Because you can't do anything about it. You can't open the door, you just stand there and you look at it. In this sense, in the sense that you cannot intervene in Beirut, the whole of Beirut is a ruin. I hope now you're understanding why. All of it is a ruin because your actions cannot penetrate this space and give shape to that space. So that space becomes like an impassible material surface. The chronotype, I think, needs to be seen as this kind of affective composition between the actions, which are these people gesticulating in space, and Beirut as an impassible surface. So to express that, I'll show you an image from somewhere else, but it's the same idea, I think. So what can you do when you live in a ruin? It's part of the labor of ruin. So what you can do is you can practically, what you have to do is you have to dance. You can do this. Now this is, I think I forgot, because you had some from 2006 and from Palestine. So I'm getting confused. But anyway, because you had similar images from both. I think this one is from the Palestine. And here you see that they are dancing. You had many images of young people dancing on the bombarded neighborhoods of Palestine. And here you see that this relation between the body and the background, meaning the city and you, is what I think we can call a chronotype, meaning it's a collision between space and time, between action and the background, and this creates an affective composition. It's not anymore an active composition. It's an affective composition because the figure and its background, they form one unity, but it's a unity which is an intensive unity and not anymore an extensive unity. I hope this is clear. And here you had many attempts and projects since 2004 of dancers and performers who used to dance with buildings. There's a dancer called Alia Hamdan. She had a project, I think, already in 2004 or 3, and she danced with the Holiday Inn. So this idea of dancing with the Holiday Inn, okay, it sounds a bit like, is this? It's like, okay, what do you do when you face these huge destroyed things in which you can't do anything? What you can do is that you become the intensive line. The intensive line is like the smile in a face. You become the intensive line, and the background composes with you this kind of face or this kind of new subject, which is Beirut, but which is now intensified by all these gesticulations that the people who know that they can do anything are now revealing, which is a way to solve or to address the ruin. So one of the ways to address the ruin is really to dance with the ruin. The expression dance with the course is in Walid himself, to dance with the course, to embrace the course. Here you dance with the ruin, meaning you are able to create a kind of elevation of the ruin because it becomes a component in this dance. This image doesn't work if you don't have the ruins in the background. So I hope this is clear. Now this is in peddling time while standing still, and the notion of chronotop. Now, when it comes to the ruin and to the labor of the ruin, what do you do with ruins? How do you address ruins, and how should you understand ruins? You have another text called The Ruin to Come. The Ruin to Come is a text where Walid really addresses the ruin frontally. And in this text, he says that practically in Beirut you have two ways of addressing the ruin. The first one, which is most known, is what you call the historicist ruin. I hope by now it will sound familiar. The historicist ruin considers that ruins are simply wreckage, and you have to repair the wreckage into something new, and to move on. I hope this dynamics is clear. What does it mean? It means that if you take Solidaire again, you look at that, you say, this is a ruin, I need to get over that, I need to rebuild the city. So for you, you have ruins, and then you move on. This is, if you want, as you have seen it, you have the relation between a ruin, you make a monument for the ruin, and then you move on. Okay? If you remember the events of any events, political destruction events, whatever, what they do usually, even the 2006 bombardments by the Israeli, they build a monument for the ruin, like the Israeli bombed and we resisted, the heroic kind of monument, and then they forget the ruins, they destroy everything, and they build a new. And this is, if you want, the articulation. You have something bad that happens. You create a monument, heroically, of course, to remember and not forget and stuff like that. And then you move on by building a new city or something other. Now, on that, Walid comments on a post stamp from 1958. I didn't find them, but you had two post stamps where you had one, in 1958, you had an earthquake in Lebanon. So you have a situation of ruin. So they make this kind of post stamp where you see ruins. Then you have another post stamp with a new city that is being built, with engineers and stuff like that. And this is the dichotomy, of course, that Walid is resisting or criticizing. He says, you don't just make like a memorial for the ruin and then you build the city, because if you do that, you deactivate the ruin. You deactivate the ruin. What does it mean, you deactivate the ruin? It means that for you now the ruin is something in the past. It was taken care of by the monument for the dead or for the whatever, and you forget about it and you build something new and you move on. Well, actually, if you think about Lebanon, especially in a protracted civil war, the ruin is still with us. How is it still with us? Actually, it's a living ruin. Why it's a living ruin? Because you can do anything in this city. And this city is actually, if you really want to think it, it's a ruin, conceptually speaking, because you cannot intervene in that space. So it's practically like a wreckage. And if you do the monument building project, you don't acknowledge that you are still living in a ever continuous ruining situation or ruined situation. So this is one of the options is Solidaire. You do like what you call you do a kind of restoration project where you bring everything back to the new. Now, the other attitude is the one that exists in Beit Beirut. You know Beit Beirut? Yeah. So what do you think of Beit Beirut? Who likes Beit Beirut? Huh? It's not bad. Is it better than Solidaire?
Yeah, to an extent.
Solidaire, you know, it's restoration to the identity. You know, they kept the facades and they destroyed everything inside. I told you this is how it was, so you still have it. And they removed all traces of war.
The thing is, in this particular case, they kept the story of the family that used to live there and like how it lived on during the war and how they had to sell the house. So they give you like a story.
In Beirut?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, because it's a museum.
Yeah.
But they will not give you the story if you are in Beirut Mall.
Yeah.
Okay. See, it's like, I'm not discussing that. Of course, Beirut, they tell you the whole story of Beirut. Actually, the job of Beirut is to tell the story of Beirut. This is what they are paid for. But the thing is that, what do you think about the treatment? You see, this is Beirut. You see, they have a clean floor, and they cleaned everything to keep it as it was in the war, not before the war. So Solidaire would clean it all. Beirut will just, will clean parts of it. So what do you think of this solution? You see, what Yusuf Haidar is the architect, a very nice guy, not criticizing him as a person. So you see what he did is that he did what he called the prothèse, like prosthesis. Like, when you cut a hand, you put a piece and stuff like that. And for him, it was like doing a kind of Frankenstein building where you keep the thing as it is, and you fill in, and you really preserve the bullets, but you clean it and you integrate the war traces in the building, which is now functioning. You go there, you have AC, exhibitions, it's very nice, etc. Now, what do you think of that? See if this kind of Sadek virus is working. It's a sensitivity that needs to be developed, I think. So if you look at that, would Walid, before I give you the answer, would he say, yes, Beit Beirut is great? And why not?
Because they're still living in the past somehow.
Are they living in the past? Beit Beirut?
The idea of just keeping it just like it was in the Civil War is as if there's... It's still problematic because we're still living the Civil War technically, just like he says, but the idea to just fix few things is the idea of like we're still living at that time. So we're still going back.
But is he really going back, this guy? You see, because this building was not kept as is, meaning ruined. This would be a melancholic posture, or a kind of, would be, you create a monument next to it, or you say we'll never forget how they destroyed us. This would be a kind of melancholic, heroic attachment to the past. But you see here, this is not what they're doing. It's transformed into a museum. It's very clean and cool and nice. There's something. It's a museum now. So it's not really a kind of attachments to the violence of the past. I hope the difference is clear. So what do you see here? You see a kind of stylization. Okay, you're going to integrate all of that into the new project. Did you get a bit the difference? The difference is not that I'm going to remain there lamenting on my destroyed building. This would be attachment to the past. No, I'm going to take the wreckage of my building and integrate it into my new villa. This is what he's doing, if you want to make it simple. Now, what I would like to hear is to feel this thing, which is very difficult to feel. So in here, do you feel the weight of the ruin?
He's intervening, so that it's not counted as a ruin.
Yeah, it's not counted as a ruin technically because he's intervening. And then, do you feel the weight of the traces, violence, past, the weight? Or here it's light? How? You think it's light. Okay, so the difficulty here is to be able to feel these things with the concepts. I think this intervention really lightens the traces. How does it lighten them? Because he integrates them into a functional building, and they become part of the composition, the architectural composition, where the traces are not anymore traces of war per se, but they become like, nice surfaces of war, of course, but they are there to serve the new kind of function. Yeah.
I feel like if they didn't turn the building into a museum, it would have kept it. If you just fixed it without the lamination, it's just that if we kept it as kind of a monument, it would have carried more weight maybe.
Yeah, if you keep it destroyed.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
So it didn't fall down on it. I don't know.
Yeah, you're proposing to keep it as is.
Yeah, it would have maybe had more weight.
This would be more a melancholic posture.
Yeah.
This would be a posture where you aestheticize the bullet holes and you clean them and you keep them in, but you feel that they become, as a ruin, they lose their weight. So what would be the solution? I don't know, but I'm telling you this, that if you are an architect, you need to deal with this kind of issues. How can I make an intervention? Because, let's say there's a project we need to intervene, and I don't want to take the melancholic posture where I just keep it as it is, like the Holiday Inn, let's say, while in the same time not losing the weight of the ruined thing. This is really an aesthetical problem. It's a problem in this case for architects. How can you intervene while keeping the weight of the ruin? Meaning you have to be able to feel that the ruin is still active and actual, and it was not neutralized. It gets attention. So I'll give you another example, which is what Walid calls the ruin to come. He didn't propose any palpable solutions, but he says, if you remember last time, he says when it comes to the testimonies, to the witnesses, when you bring these people with all their heaviness, and last time on purpose I tried to make you feel the heaviness of the witnessing in a civil war, and you put them on a table and each one of them tried to bring in his piece of the story, you feel here that the ruin, or in this case, the past as violent past, is really still weighing and forming these subjects. So in the ruin to come, what Walid says is that you shouldn't lose the weight that each one is carrying, the weight of the violence, and be able to, when it comes to witnessing, compose these different weights together in a kind of chorus. I hope you remember that from last time. You have to have one kind of breath that traverses all kinds of very, very heavy witnessing situations. So in the ruin to come, what Walid says, if you take this, what he calls this one a premature ruin where it is neutralized, he says what we really should consider a ruin is this work of patching together, it's like a patchwork, pasting together, sewing together the different testimonies of those who witnessed the war. Now, how do you do it with a building? I'll leave you imagine that. You can do it for a paper. How to intervene Beit Beirut, where we can keep the ruin. If you create little bubbles inside the place, are you keeping the ruin? I don't know. It was proposed. Like you create, like interventions, capsules inside the building where you don't touch the building, but you circulate in it. Bernard Khoury, for example, proposed a diagonal shaft in the Holiday Inn, a diagonal elevator, where you take the elevator down, and he kept the building as it is, but he just made a hole which is a bit like that through all the floors, and while taking the elevator, you go up and you see the Holiday Inn being destroyed until you reach the top, the bar area, because he proposed to do a bar in the place where there was a bar, the place where you have this white thing. This is another approach. Right? Which one is better, I don't know. I leave you debate or reflect on it. But you feel here that the tension is different. You feel that there's something of the dusty, ruined, almost dangerous side of the ruin which is still there, or it's still there. But at the same time, you have an intervention in the ruin that is going to make this kind of two things present in the same time, but in a more physical way. Okay? So this is, if you want, problems of the ruin to come. Now, to continue around that, and to conclude, the last text that deals really with this kind of space in which we are is called Beirut Open City. I hope you read it. It's part of the readings, I guess. And in Beirut Open City, Walid says that we really need to distinguish wreckage from ruin and maze from labyrinth, because if we don't do this distinction, we wouldn't be able to inhabit this place which became a ruin. So I repeat, you have two distinctions, the maze and the labyrinth, which are not the same, and Walid insists a lot on explaining that a maze is not a labyrinth. And only when you are able to access the labyrinth, you can exit the maze. What is he talking about? You see, a maze is a place where you get lost. This is a maze. A maze is, these gardens, like these, gardens in which you get lost. This is a maze. A maze is really a place where you get lost because everything looks the same. I hope this is clear. Now, why in a maze everything looks the same? Either purposefully, because the guy who did it, he wanted to create a maze, or because of destruction and the ruin. In 2006, for those who were here, if you go towards the south, it's a maze. Why it's a maze? Because it's the same all over the place. You don't have any more signs to distinguish this house from that house or anything, and you only have these roads, and you get lost. You get lost because of this similarity, because of this excessive similarity. And this is when space becomes a maze. Now, space becomes a maze in a different way also when the Minotaur is inside the maze, or not necessarily inside the maze, or when the monster is in space. And you have two monsters these days. The first one is what you call the military machine. When the Israeli invaded Beirut becomes a maze. Why? Imagine you are a fighter and the Israelis are coming. Doesn't space turns into a space which is maze-like, meaning you don't know where to hide and you're running and you get lost because you have this monster on your traces. So mazes or spaces become mazes when they are occupied by a monster. And Walid here is referring to the Israeli invasion, meaning Beirut became a maze because people were frightened and running in all directions and they didn't know anymore where to go and where to hide. And in this situation, space is a space of loss. Imagine the situation. A serial killer is running after you, and wherever you hide, you feel that it's not a point where you can rest, or you can inhabit, or you can orient yourself, because now you are disoriented by the fact that you are under threat. Another form of the maze is aerial bombardments. When the Israeli bombard, let's say, the south or Beirut, or the southern suburb of Beirut, it becomes a maze because now everything is the same. So you have these two versions of the maze. And in here, indeed, you get lost. You get really lost, and you can't really find rest. You can't inhabit the maze. Unless, of course, in one situation, if you can, you have to kill the monster to be able to re-inhabit, not the maze, but to stop this maze situation. The issue, what do you do when you can't kill the monster? This is the question. The Lebanese are not really able to kill the internal or external monsters. So what do you do in this situation where space is occupied by these fearful powers, be it external or internal? And because space is occupied by these fearful powers, you have a situation where you are constantly in a maze-like situation. Now, to escape the maze, Walid proposes the labyrinth. Now, what is the labyrinth? The labyrinth is a space where when you're in, you can't get out, and this is the definition of the labyrinth. The labyrinth is a space where you don't know how you get in, but when you're in, you can't get out. So when you're in, and if you're out, you're just out. But if you're in, you don't know how you got in, but once in, you're always in. So there are no entrances and exits when it comes to the labyrinth. There is an entrance and an exit to the maze if you can find it, or if you can kill the monster. I hope you're getting this distinction. So what is the labyrinth that is going to save you literally from the maze? So the labyrinth is going to save you from the maze, as Walid puts it, is actually when you consider the maze itself as something which is not anymore only spatial. What I'm saying is very simple. I explain. There's a book by Khouri. Khouri wrote a book called Abwab al-Madina, where you see a kind of beginning of this idea of the labyrinth, which is a place where you can run when you are in a maze. So you are in a maze, monsters are pursuing you and stuff like that, are running after you, and you're able to escape that by connecting to the labyrinth. Now, Khouri in the book Abwab al-Madina, he considers that when the Israeli invaded, Beirut wasn't anymore just in Beirut, meaning where it is here. It went to the south. It's an interesting idea. What does it mean? It means that, Beirut is here. And when the Israeli invaded, because the fighters were fighting Israel in the south, so Beirut went to the south. Meaning, if you can beat the Israelis in the south, they're going to retreat from Beirut, to put it simply. And hence, what is at stake in Beirut now is at stake where? In the south. So you see that now Beirut is already taking a shape which is not just geographical or anchored in a space. So what happens in Beirut is actually affected by what is happening in the south. And here Khouri says you have this kind of Beirut that becomes a temporal entity, meaning something that we think about, we feel, we are preoccupied with, not only geographically. And by becoming this kind of temporal entity, it is everywhere and nowhere. And when you are in Beirut in this sense, you're either always in it or you're not in it. Hope you're getting the difference. So what he's saying is that, let's take the situation of fighting for Beirut. When you consider that Beirut is a kind of now political problem or a political issue, it's not anymore just the geographical Beirut, and you can tackle this political issue from all around the globe. From all around the globe. The problem, Walid says, is that if you just consider Beirut as a political labyrinth, meaning a place where you go because you have this kind of cause, as we say, Beirut as a cause, as a political cause. If you consider that Beirut is only a political cause, you're of course always in it, and once in it, you can't get out of it. But the problem is that this kind of labyrinth can only realize itself in an intervention in the maze. Yeah, so I go slowly. It's very simple what I'm saying. You have Israel is occupying Beirut, and you say, as a political thinker like Khouri, that Beirut is not just the space, it's a cause. And this cause, we can fight it in Palestine, in the south, even in New York if you want. It doesn't matter as long as you fight for the cause. So if you are in New York and you're fighting for the cause Beirut, you are in Beirut. Okay, so in a way you detach Beirut from its geolocations, from its geography. Now the only problem is that this project can only realize itself if you have an intervention in the maze, meaning if you destroy the Israeli invasion in Beirut, in the geographical Beirut. Did you get that relation? Okay? So this is why Walid says the problem with Khouri is that, of course, now Beirut is detached from its geolocation, so it can be inhabited in a way by all the militants of the world. Actually, today with Palestine, in parentheses, the project of Elia Sulaiman, I think, is very close to that. I don't know if you know Elia Sulaiman. He's a Palestinian movie maker, great movie maker. You can watch all his movies. And actually, in the last movie, he says that the whole world is Palestine. So this idea that the whole world is Palestine, because today in the whole world you have borders, segregation, apartheid, and all of these things that used to be very intensely present only in Palestine. Now it's all over the globe, so the whole world is Palestine, and the Palestinian cause becomes the cause of the whole world. Now, in this kind of language, what is happening? What's happening is that a place is becoming a labyrinth in the sense that you are in it all the time as a cause. So what I'm trying to tell you is this. The issue is that if you take it as a political labyrinth, meaning this intellectual, I don't know how to call it, this kind of mental space, you're in it, but the problem is that this mental space can effectuate itself as a political space only when you intervene on the ground. So what's the use of being with the cause Beirut in New York if you don't do anything in Beirut? So this is why Walid thinks that the solution of Khouri, which is to build Beirut as a political labyrinth, is not enough, because you will have sooner or later to go back in the maze and confront the enemy. Actually, this labyrinth, only purpose and destination is to go back on the ground and confront the enemy. So if you lobby in New York and Washington, if you fight in the South, if you do this and that, all of that, why are you doing it? To liberate Beirut from the occupation, at least in 82. So this is why this labyrinth, says Walid, will lead to destruction. It's a labyrinth that doesn't just accept the situation of the maze. So what is the labyrinth that he is proposing? He is proposing a labyrinth which is an open city labyrinth. I would call it an artistic, intellectual, creative labyrinth. You call it whatever you want. Which is, I think, still fully political, but at least in that labyrinth, you can have as many possibilities as you want without the need to go back and confront the monster or effectuate that in a situation of destruction. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about, if you want, the example that Walid gives is The Mountain, the movie The Mountain by Ghassan Salhab. I hope you will watch it. Did you watch The Mountain? Ghassan Salhab, you know Ghassan Salhab? No. So Ghassan Salhab is the guy who did La Rose de Personne, the short movie, and Beirut Fantôme, the guy who comes back. So if you can find his movies, they're available, and watch all his movies, because we're going to talk a lot about him. So Ghassan Salhab made a movie called The Mountain, where actually it's the story of a guy that tells his friends and parents that he's traveling for a long business trip. And indeed, they take him to the airport, and he makes it as if he's gonna board, and they leave. And when he sees that they left, he turns back and he goes to the mountain. And there he takes a room in the mountain and he sits there. Now, what Walid says is that in this little scenario, you see that you have a guy that gets himself out of sequential time, the time of usually normal life, or in this case, the maze, and he goes there, and when he's there in the mountain, he inhabits this place which is all snowy, so it's like, it's like a place that looks like a maze, and he stays there. And while he stays there, you start seeing the world from his eyes, which are the eyes of a man living in suspension, which is the eyes of a man living, as you say, between two worlds, and you see how the world looks for him from that vantage point. And from that vantage point, he's able to get in contact again with the sceneries, with all of these things that you see in the movie. Okay, so I'm saying is that, so I repeat. The labyrinth that Walid is talking about is that the maze itself, or Beirut, can be transformed into an imaginary work. And only this place of the imaginary plane can turn the maze into a labyrinth that you will forever inhabit. Okay, what is he talking about? Practically all what we talked about, all of it, seeing excessive materialities, witnesses of all kinds, all that work that Walid is doing conceptually is actually a way to take what you have here in the maze and project it into a plane of, I call it the imaginary plane, or an aesthetical plane, or an intellectual plane, where all of these things take another dimension and they start to compose together. So we all feel that we are stuck here, at least in a Sadek perspective. You're stuck here, you don't have a future, there's nothing to do, the city is a ruin, and the city is a maze. It's a ruin and a maze, and you are blocked. So what can you do? You can either dance with the ruin, and this will compose something in the actual world which is not of this world, or you can project an imaginal plan, and in this plan you can rethink Beirut in its open possibilities. Meaning you will think that in Beirut you will have to have a blind sight, you will have to have a tactile seeing, the figure cannot get out of the background, speech is soliloquy, ventriloquy, etc., difficult speech, mourning in the presence of the corpse, and all of these concepts and images are actually the way you get out of the city. And of course, when you're there, you're always there, and you will not be able to get out. I think that Walid will not be able to get out of Walid, it's over. Now, this is how he sees the world, or this city, and because he sees this city like that, everything he sees takes a place in this configuration. Now, this plane, which is an open city of the imaginary world, or an imaginal Beirut, is a place that can be inhabited and can be connected to the others. So Ghassan Salah makes a work, and Walid considers this connected to him. Then you have, Walid Ra'ad, Haji Touma, whoever. All of these are doing works, and all of these things are getting connected and opening on possibilities that allow you to live and breathe in this city. Instead of being here completely stuck and thinking about what can I do, I can't do anything, all my projects are being blocked by the situation. What Walid is saying, commenting on Rossellini's Rome open city, is that actually if you really want to think of Rossellini, and I think he's right in that, Rossellini made a movie when we all know that the Italians were fascist, so they were like the Germans back then, and we all know that they were fascist and they lost the war. So he made a movie where actually Italians look like not fascist, and they look like resistance, and Godard says he made us forget that they were fascist. Which means that you can make moves in the imaginal world where you change the maze in this imaginary projection, or in this imaginary transformation. So in the same way as Rossellini transformed practically the whole history of Italy in our imaginary, but today we remember Rossellini, Open City. When it comes to the fascist era, it's the only work that really stands and eclipses all the others. You remember Rossellini's movie, And this is really how he's able to transform the maze into a work which is labyrinthine, because for you now this exists. Rome, open city. So that's it for Walid. I hope with Walid now we get the map of the problems that will be covered in here. And I'll show you the table. Then I'll comment on 2 or 3 things about this labyrinthine world. So for you not to get lost in the labyrinth, so this is the map of the labyrinth, okay? So you have each labor is here, and these here in gray are the concepts of Walid, and here you have the anti-concepts, what Walid doesn't like, okay? So in experience, you have the fundamental experience. What are we doing? What are we dealing with? So you see here, for example, you have when you return or you have a coma or stuff like that, you are in an excessive matter situation. How does it function? Actively, you disperse the traces. You include the violence inside the image, etc., etc. I hope this is clear. And here you have the examples he gives. So here, Abi Lama, blemish, and the wood-like makeup are the examples, and the text from where it comes. PL is placed at last, and you have the list of the text down. So here you have really like a map where you can see all the concepts and circulates among these concepts. Now sometimes you have something like that, big black lines, because here you have packs of concepts. It's under label of seeing, but here you have mythical seeing or the past, and here you have another sequence. So it's in sequences where you have, it's the same sequencing, okay? So with that, I think you have a map of everything we did so far. You see we have a lot now. So you have covered already all of these concepts and all of these situations. What do you do with the ruin, with destruction, disappear, missing, returnees, when you can't do anything, all of these things are here listed. And like in the beginning, you have the list of the text on the sides. Now, to conclude, there are some pieces that I didn't talk about, but which are in the notes. And to talk about them, we are going to do some of Egyptian stuff. Okay? So this is a bas-relief, Egyptian bas-relief. And here, what I would like you to see here, it's a very simple thing. Doesn't need to get too complicated. You see, in Egyptian art, you have a geometrization of all the figures. They look like idealized, as we say. And if you take Deleuze chapter 14 from Logic of Sensations, Deleuze says that in such an art, what you paint is only the essence. The essence is what is always true. So what is a human being? You don't paint me or him. You paint the perfect human being with, with straight lines. The shoulder is half a circle and stuff like that. This is when you really represent the idea of the essence as such. I hope this is clear. Now, you don't paint someone with a belly and stuff like that. No, you paint really like the human. And when you paint a papyrus, you paint the perfect plant, the perfect palm, the perfect animal. And this is if you want Egyptian art in short. Okay? You see, what you do is that on the background, you put the image of the essence itself. I'll show you Greek art. Here you see the image itself represents the essence as such. Now, if you take Greek art, this is not Greek, but it's Greek. It's Renaissance, so it doesn't matter. Even in Greek art, you have, it's the same issue where you have a figure which is distant from the background, and the figure actually stands on its own, and it's formed by the essence instead of it being itself the essence. I hope you're getting the difference. Here, when you see a Greek sculpture or a Renaissance Greek Roman sculpture, what you see is that if you take Plato, Plato is not an Egyptian, even though he used to love Egyptian art and wise thinkers, because for Plato, the Egyptian discovered the plane of the pure essences, how things are in themselves, geometry and stuff like that. While Plato is interested in how these essences appear in this world. So you have a kind of formation of this world by the essence, which is what we call a beautiful form. What is beauty? Beauty is when you have something accidental like us. We are accidents because we are going to disappear. But when you have someone formed ideally by the ideals, you have this kind of very well formed accident. Is this clear? Yeah? You're smiling, which is very good. Okay. So I hope you're getting at least these two articulations. It's not that complicated. You can paint the essence as essence, or you can paint an accident that is looking like the essence. You know, in Greek art, you have the proportions, 7 heads to, and your finger should be 7 of the hand. All of these proportions are for what? Are simply a way to configure the accident as if it is ideal. You see, now you have a figure standing away from the background. It can stand on its own because it's not anymore the plane of the essences, and it is informed by the essences. I hope this is clear. Okay? So when you look at something and you are a Greek, you consider it as if it is more or less ideal. And if you are an Egyptian, you just look at things as they are as essences, and you don't consider the accident. So the accident is absolutely outruled in Egyptian art. The accident is a well-formed accident in Greek art. And it's a well-formed accident by what? By the essence. This is why you have these beautiful sculpture figures standing on their own away from the background. So this is what you call it's a kind of Greek vision of the world. And now I'll move into that. I don't think that these are examples that Walid would like a lot, but anyway. This is by Al-Baki, it's a Piccadilly. And this is Tom Young, it's the Holiday Inn. And even though I'm not even though I don't think that Walid would support Tom Young, but it doesn't matter. What matters is what he's going to say. So this is Tom Young speaking.
قصيرة خربت الدنيا وبلشت الحرب. من أهم ساحاتها هو أوتيل هوليداي إن.
Seeing the building from a distance, you understand its context within the city and what it must have meant in the Civil War. I use this very bright red, which expresses this, the blood that's been spilled there, and the violence and the fire and the hate and the anger. And every time I slash at the paint, it's a way of going through that anger and that violence and honoring that. And I also erase it as if that itself is the erasure of memory.
When the Civil War started in April 1975.
Besides the fact that he is still part of a distant seeing and he wants to erase memory and all of these cliches, and his paint is metaphorical, etc., etc., what you need to pick is that for him to paint the Holiday Inn, what is the other half of the Holiday Inn? It's the violence that is surrounding it. And this is, I think, besides the treatment that he did, which I don't think fits this awareness, I think what you need to see in areas which are all the time hit by violence, things other side is not anymore the essence, but it's the materiality of violence. This is why I showed you Egyptian art and Greek art, because in a normal world words are either Egyptian or Greek, or there's a third one which is statistical. Maybe I'll talk about it. These are normal words. Normal words is when you have something relates to its meaning. You're a human being, you relate to what is a human being. You're a building, you relate to what is a human being, or you consider the whatness as such, meaning the essence as such. Okay? Now, what I'm trying to tell you is that what I think with Walid we can start to think is that here you have an alternative dimension, which is that things are doubled with their material destructive side. If you take the Holiday Inn, its other side, it's not that it's a hotel, it's that it's the subject of the battle where you had a lot of people killed. If you walk in Beirut with someone, he'll tell you, if he's part of that, I think most of the people will tell you that here they arrested people and they killed them on the ID. There they used to occupy the building. Here we used to torture people. And if you watch Lam Yazrej, Object of War, unfortunately I don't have a clip here. You know Lam Yazrej, we'll cover her too. She's a Lebanese artist, and she made a series of little clips called Objects of War. So you bring an object like this, and it reminds you of the war. And you start saying, well, you know what? I remember that during the war we used to put water in big gallons, and this is my object of war. Or you can say my object of war is the lux, the lamp thing, or the butagaz, or whatever. And these are objects of war, and you can have all kinds of objects which are objects of war. And this is what's interesting. You have objects which are really not related to the wars that become objects of war, like masbaha and a shirt and pairs of shoes. All of these become object of war. Why? Because the war imposes a use on these objects that makes their essence now related to the war rather than related to what they are. So I'm trying to tell you is that when Walid says, in Lebanon, seeing presses the figure on the background, and you have this kind of material seeing where the figure cannot detach itself from the background, like in Greek art, and stand on its own. It's because any figure is heavied by the memories, the violence, the issues that pulls it down and makes it glued on the background. And this background is not the background of the essence, like in Egyptian art. It's not that now you see the perfect bottle of water. It's now, no, you see the bottle of water as you cannot see it anymore as a bottle of water, because when you look at it, all what you remember is your fear running to the basement, or your fear of not having water, or all of these incidents that now weighs everything you see. So as a civilization, in quote, if you want to think now this not only as, as a way of doing art and thinking, I think the labyrinth that Walid is talking about, that you can extract from the maze, is that what is happening here is that we are acquiring a new way of thinking and seeing and doing everything else because of these repetitive experiences of living in a continuous civil war or a protracted civil war, where everything now becomes a kind of thing which is doubled by this civil war. All right? I hope this is clear. This is why I showed you these pictures. So you have a third one, I will not talk about it, which is what we call statistical words, where the accident becomes something, but we'll see it later. Okay, do you have questions on that? So, see you next time.